Cool.
It's always great to see the series of Unknown Pleasures, Australian independent cinema that is screening from time to time at the Thornbury Picture House. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking, first of all, to to Bill Mousoulis, who's co-curator of Unknown Pleasures with Chris Luscri, and Ivan Gaal, who is celebrating 50 years of filmmaking. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Peter.
Peter. Nice to see you again. Peter, you can't see me.
That's all right. That's quite okay. We can hear you, and that's very important. First of all, Bill, I'll ask you first of all, what made you decide to do a special celebration of Ivan Gaal's films?
Well, it's actually, it is a bit of a coincidence because of, the film that came out recently or played at Melbourne Film Festival, Senses of Cinema by John Hughes and Tom Zabriskie, which is about the co-ops, the Melbourne and Sydney film co-ops in the 60s and 70s going into the 80s. And it's kind of coincidental with that, but I have been planning to do a special tribute to Ivan for the past year or so, and yeah, just happened to be ready to go now at the same time as that Senses of Cinema film was released. But basically, I think it's that thing of just cherishing and honoring one's elders almost. It sounds very cringy when you say it like that, but it's kind of like, people wait for people to die first and then celebrate them, but I just would rather celebrate them while they're alive. So Ivan, I'm glad that you're still here with us, and we can put on a special night for you. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
That's terrific. And we should mention it's on September 13th. At 8:15 Tuesday at the Thornbury Picture House. Ivan, let me ask you first of all, because I know we actually do go back a number of years. What made you decide to make films in the first place?
Well, I came to Australia when I was 18 years old, and didn't have any English knowledge, and was living in a boarding house. And luckily I met somebody who was a photographer from Hungary, and he taught me the basic photographic technique. And so I went out and bought my Voigtlander camera back in the 50s, and I was photographing everything and found out real fun expressing myself. Anyway, to cut it short, I moved on to the Super 8, and the Super 8 was also working well, and I was sort of happy while I was working at the ABC with a different job, more or less camera and audio. And so I was always dreaming about making films. So it's happened that I worked with somebody who said, I'm going to help you make this film. And so I got myself a 60mm Bolex camera, hand wound, and also I could go out and film, and he helped me edit it. He worked at Channel 2 as well. So that was basically the idea, was that I wanted to express myself, and I love films. I loved all the Russian propaganda films, even they were propaganda films, but I still liked them. We had to see all Eisenstein's movies, and I loved them, and learned a lot about filmmaking, cutting, editing, close-ups, cutting, no budget. We have to have small short shots of crowds, more close-ups because they're cheaper. So anyway, I learned a lot about the filmmaking back in Hungary as well. And I always go and then looked and search out good films that was really meaning something to me, my life, as well as other people's lives as well. So it was really a slow drift into filmmaking. And when I got into the AVEC film unit, the Audiovisual Education Center's film unit, well, it's all started. It was really wonderful.
How very interesting that sort of origin story. And Ivan, I've had a look at all of the films that Bill has put together on a Vimeo link. How do you decide what topics or ideas you want to film?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Peter. I always looked for something that the media wasn't interested. You know, the media I followed, and I knew it was always sensational and newsworthy. But what interested me is something that nobody cares about. So I thought when I read a newspaper article in the 60s about duck shooting, so I thought this is a good topic. Or I worked near the Camberwell Junction, and I saw how incredible. There's 5 roads going in, and there's no traffic lights, you know, or things like that. Or when I got myself a Baidu camera, and I got an interferometer made by a friend for the Camberwell Junction, I also went into making an animated film, not animation, time-lapse film about the what you call the 1977 eclipse, you know. And so, but because I work for the department, I could look at interesting topic, and I could go to the subject coordinators in the department, and I sell them the idea, you know. So they wanted the topic to be made, and I wanted it to be made, such as the Gifted Children or the Mentor Program, or Ibrahim, you know. That was another film that was all interesting to me to make, but I had to have a client, and the clients were there in the Department of Education. So occasionally I did that, but some other times I did it myself. So I got a grant for Applause Please from the Films Australia at that stage, and with Max Gillies and Bob and Joe, I could do what I like. And as it happened, it turned out to be quite successful. So really, it was a topic that I didn't have to work on it hard. It just came to me.
How very interesting.
Makes any sense. Pardon?
Very interesting to hear that. Yeah, that's great, and that you pretty much had control over the topics and issues that you wanted to cover, and the education department supported you, which is great to know that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I mean, you've made such an interesting collection of films about Ibrahim, because I remember seeing Ibrahim in my teaching days when I worked in a school and so on, and that was one that was always shown for professional development, understanding migrants and culture and language. How much of that was natural, and how much of that was staged? Because I'm quite intrigued now that I've seen Ibrahim again. I mean, you've got a terrific child actor there, or the child who was actual refugee from Lebanon and so on. But how much of that was recreated? How much of that was actually going on?
Yes, interesting question. Well, I'm going to give away my secret, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to make the film. So as always, or most of the times, I start off with a newspaper article, and that story was written up by Watson. I can't remember her name actually, but I was so taken by it that I took it to the department. I said, look, this is very important because we could change the system for these people. And because I experienced a lot of those things that in the film and at the time in the article, so I was very keen to get going with it. As always, you know, when you make something bigger than the norm in a department, you find that it's not always easy. So unfortunately, we had to look around in the Arab community to find people who could do it. So this kid was very natural, very good, and he went through the experiences himself. So in a way, I couldn't have shot it without actually scripting it. So without actually setting it up and making a documentary, a mockumentary, I suppose you call it. I don't know what the real word for it.
But docudrama, I think.
Docudrama.
Yeah, that's better.
Docudrama, yeah.
Yeah.
So I am, and that was the problem at the time, because of course the media was interested, is it really real, you know? But I said, of course it is real, because it happens every day, you know, these kids just go into the classroom. What do you mean real? I mean, I couldn't have made the film with real people. It would have been very difficult. So yes, I was cheating a bit, and luckily I had a good cast, and luckily I had good people who helped me. And I suppose the result shows that it made changes in the department's policy towards these children. And that was a game changer, because they realized that you can't just throw a kid in from a war-torn country into a classroom. I mean, it's so bloody obvious. So, you know, interestingly enough, the same topic is made by an Australian filmmaker in Ireland with black people, and she was nominated for an Academy Award back about, I suppose, 15 years ago. I can't remember her name, but I thought, well, that's great. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery, isn't it? So anyway, so it went on, and it did good things, the film, despite the fact that it wasn't real in inverted commas.
No, but docudrama is an important part of telling a story, and you do it well. And in fact, you're probably groundbreaking, because docudramas are much more popular nowadays, or more prevalent. So you were setting a trend in the first place.
Thank you. I'm very kind. Can I write this down?
Certainly.
I think, if I can just add that, I think it was groundbreaking, I think, because at that point, despite what was happening overseas with documentary filmmaking, you know, Ivan, within an educational context, was probably still pressured a bit to have something more conventional, more didactic, you know, with a voiceover going and all that kind of stuff. And he chose to, you know, be more pure with his representation of the boy, the situation that he's going through and all that. So Ivan had good instincts, I believe, back then, and still does.
Oh, absolutely. And just on that, Bill, how did you decide which films you're going to be screening at the Thornbury Picture House?
I had a few kind of almost chose themselves, like his most recent one, A Man from the Other Side, and Camberwell Junction, but I was intrigued by Ibrahim, which we were just talking about, which I'd never seen, because Adrian Martin, you know, the film critic, when he did an overview of Ivan's work for his website, or actually it was for Metro magazine originally, he singled out Ibrahim as a really great kind of film, and I was intrigued. I wanted to see that, so I programmed it, and also there was a retrospective of Ivan's work back in Hungary a few years ago, called Cine Migrants, and Ivan went there and he was celebrated, you know, back home. And it wasn't a huge retrospective. There were about five or six of Ivan's films, I think, and so a couple of them were like restored, and there were reasonably good, you know, versions done. So Ibrahim was one of those anyway. And I did also ask Ivan just now, or a couple of months back, which films of his he preferred. You know, we could have gone with the, you know, films with Max Gillies in them in the 70s, which would have been of great interest to an audience. But Ivan preferred not to screen those ones. And so, yeah, we do like to have a little bit of a collaboration with the filmmaker each time when we curate something.
Absolutely.
So interestingly enough, I just want to say that when we took the film to Hungary, which was made 40 years ago, well, people came to me and they said, this is happening in our country now, you know, so I felt good about that, that the issue hasn't gone away, and it's always going to be with
obviously
a whole bunch of refugees in Europe,
yes.
from the Middle East and everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, look, excellent. Well done on that. And I noticed that some of the films selected, they do have messages as well, that there's social commentary, etc. I mean, all for the love of it, obviously, takes a swipe at duck hunting with what
Oh,
happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a newspaper article that I read in the 60s, and I don't want to give it all away, but it was related to the war in Vietnam and also the people who die in the first minutes of the duck shooting season, which to me was very, very unusual and different to what I normally was used to.
And with Camberwell Junction, how long after your film was released did they put in traffic lights?
Well, it took 10 years, 10 years, and it didn't happen overnight. I mean, look, you know how the leading people in this country are taking notice, but they don't want to give you the credit. They wait a bit longer so that it becomes their work, not somebody who's instigated the whole problem. So I think it was done, and it was good that it was done. I mean, I don't think it probably my film did it, but it was obviously there for somebody to do something about it, So yeah.
I'm sure it had an influence, because I can see people taking lives into their own hands trying to get across Camberwell Junction at that time in the 70s when you filmed that. And I was interested in Jubilee and Beyond because I was wanting to see whether you were going to make commentary about the monarchy in Australia, and you sort of do that by having the McGraw and Melbourne High students commenting. To some extent, some pro, some anti, etc. But were you intending to make something that polarized audiences, or did you just want to make it as just a straight depiction of the Queen in Australia?
Well, look, the sports department, or the physical and sport education section of the department, came to us and said, look, we have to make a documentary about this topic. And so the Queen is meeting 14,000 children and so forth. So it was a discussion at the AVEC Film Unit. I don't claim all of it to be mine. I mean, you remember Ross Campbell, where Ross Campbell was head of the AVEC Film Unit, and he was instrumental in making the film a bit of a stand-up, right? So, and I love stand-up, so it was all working out together well. And we had the material, we had the kids, and we had all that stuff. So we had to make an order out of disorder. So it revolved, it sort of evolved in a way, and it was entertaining, it was thought-provoking, but we didn't want to make explicit comments about the monarchy or such, because I always believed in open-ended films, and I have to quote John Flaus, which I never forgot, when he said, I like films when there are gaps on the screen, so I can get into the screen and communicate and come back again. I like gaps, and I sort of, that stayed with me because John so beautifully defined it for me, and so we have to leave the gaps, the kids saying this and that, and the Queen is there, so interpret it yourself, the footballers, the whole circus, I think life was a circus at the time when we looked at this whole issue, and I did want to have that film made it like a bit of a circus. But interestingly enough, it was selected for the 1978 Australian Film Awards, the AFI Awards, as a finalist. And when the management in the Department of Education saw the film, they immediately banned it. So the film was banned for about 5 years. Okay, it was just set on the shelf, and we gradually brought it out when it was a bit safer. But so I missed out on a nomination, because 78, or I think it was 78 or 79, but we had to withdraw it. Yeah. So but I still look at it and I still love it. I don't know how it all just came together, all these people helping together, making this little film. And that's the only film Screen Australia has in their library for me, the Queen's Visit. And they actually make it a positive comment that this is a record of the Queen's Visit. It's not a bloody record, it's more than that, And interesting enough, one of the kids, Ian Lang, who was a filmmaker himself, he was one of the debaters in the group. He was so taken by the filmmaking process that he decided there and then he's going to be a filmmaker, and he's coming for the night. So I'm going to ask him to stand up and talk. Because he's the one who makes a comment. He said it's better to have the Queen on the flag than a can of beer. That's his last comment.
Yes, they're the only two options, of course. So I know, yeah. Hey, that should make the night very interesting. That's great. And I must ask you about the punter, because when I saw the film, I thought, you're going to make a comment about betting and all sorts of things, but it's actually more benign than that. And Bill Collins can be seen there as the race caller. So that was well done.
I'm sorry about it. Well, we went to Channel 7 because that was my graduation film at Swinburne, and I picked, because you see, I like people, even now that I'm taking portrait photography, and I like people that I can get inside their heads and I know a bit better without actually talking to them. And I saw Jack, watching or listening to the radio in the garden one day, and his lips are moving, his eyes was popping out, and at the end he said, "Oh shit," and I thought that makes a little film, but without actually doing a value judgment on him. It's just that there are so many people in the mid-rig races who very few people went, but they all actually were gambling and putting a 2 bob each way from workplace. Now it's all changed, of course, but to me that just was an interesting story that I left the gaps for people to interpret. How sad it was that time that people get involved horses, and they still do, but he had to suffer for it in a way. But it sort of, I don't know what I'll make a sense at all, but to answer your question, Peter, I didn't want to make any value judgment. I just wanted to leave it open, because that was, to me, that was educational filmmaking, to draw out, because the word education means draw out in Greek, doesn't it? Yes. Education in Greek means draw out. So Bill would know more about that.
Education is not a Greek word in itself, but so I'm not sure which
to
word.
Educate is to draw out, isn't it? The Greek believe in to draw out the knowledge.
I'd say so. I'd say through the Socratic dialoguing and Aristotelian questioning of everything. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what my thought behind it. Leave it open. Let people decide, and look, 40 years on, I mean, it's 42 years on, he's still alive. So obviously something was working.
He took a gamble and won. So, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Now I know I can see I'm running out of time. So Bill, let's talk about how people can book tickets and go to this special event next Tuesday.
Well, they can actually just go directly to the Thornbury Picture House's website, and the event is kind of listed there. And yeah, there's tickets available. There's still another 20 or so seats available at the moment. So I suggest people get in pretty quick, because I think we will have a full house. And it's normal kind of cinema prices for the picture house there. And yeah, there's also other information, some program notes that I've put together on one of my websites, and you can Google Unknown Pleasures, but put Unknown Pleasures film screenings. Otherwise, you'll come up with the Joy Division album, which is one of Anthony Albanese's favorite albums. I was amazed to discover about a month or two back. So anyway, so yeah, there's information up on the web. So thank you, Google. Yeah.
Thank you, Google. Okay, excellent stuff. And just before we finish, have you got plans for the next Unknown Pleasures event?
Yeah, actually, we've got one coming up hot on the heels of this one in just like about 3 weeks' time. And that's, we're going to host Margot Nash from Sydney. Her film Vacant Possession, which played at MIF last year, she did not get to, personally, physically come over for a Q&A. So we're basically doing a Q&A with her, for her film Vacant Possession, even if it got a good screening at MIF anyway, or maybe it was online. I can't remember what happened last year. And so she's in place, and there's other, little things in the pipeline, and which, I guess we won't even, mention now, because I don't know, things shift all the time in this kind of world that we live in at the moment, which is a world where we go day by day with checking how we feel and then doing rats and whatever. But anyway, so yeah.
Okay, we might talk again with the Margot Nash event, Vacant Possession, such an important film. Ivan, congratulations on your 50 years of filmmaking. And I don't suppose you're making another film at the moment?
Oh, give me a break. Look, I know the energy you need to make films. I mean, look, I just turned into a sort of a portrait photographer. Even that can break you, because there's so many people involved. And so now I just have a portrait in the National Photography Portrait Gallery in the finals, and goes around Australia for the next year. So that's what I'm doing, and I love to make films, but not unless I win Touch Lotto and hire everybody to do the work. It's very, 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 as you know, Peter, it's very physically demanding work. And Philip Adams always used to say that in Czechoslovakia, to get into the film school, you have to run 100 meters in 12 seconds. You have to throw the shot put. You have to do triple jump. You have to run. Philip Adams' famous saying that to be a filmmaker in Czechoslovakia, you had to be also fit as a sportsman. So there, I'm past the stage.
Wow. I like it. I like it. Great stuff. It's been my great pleasure to be speaking to Ivan Gaal, whose films will be presented courtesy of Bill Mousoulis and Chris Luscre as part of Unknown Pleasures on Tuesday, September 13th at 8:15 at the Thornbury Picture House. Just go to the Thornbury Picture House website and book tickets. Thank you so much, both of you, for talking with me.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. I enjoyed it. Have it again.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Peter.